Welcome to Opinion Opinion. I'm Jazmin, your ever opinionated friend. Joining us today is someone who contributed to my personal development. He is not just my professor back in college, but also showed me that it is okay to show my true colors. An author, LGBT advocate, and entrepreneur. Let's all welcome Farcia. So our topic
Hi.
for today is Sogie 101. SOGIE, an acronym for sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. This topic is not exclusive to the members of LGBT. Everyone has a sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Fire has helped several companies and groups regarding this subject. Fire, can you tell us more about yourself and how you got started in this advocacy?
Sure. Hi, Jazz. It's so nice to see you again after all these years. It's
I
amazing. You
know.
look great.
Thank
Uh,
you. You too.
so, well, about your question, your first ask. So anyway, hi. I'm Fire. Jazz and I are not far in age. I was a professor when I was 22 years old. So, I was very young. But I mean, that ship has sailed. So I'm done with the academe now.
Thank
So
you
what
for
I do
clearing
now,
that out. Some of my friends were like, "Oh, you're a professor? So how old?" No, no, no. You're not old.
I know, right? Yeah, people think I'm very, very old, but not really. But
Until they
anyways,
see you, I guess.
maybe when they see the podcast, hi friends of Jazz,
Ah.
surprise, I am not that old. But I mean, lately it's been different. I have left the academe many many years ago. Back in 2000, I already left the academe. Um, I pursued a corporate career. So currently, I am actually a corporate slave. uh, I work in BPO in the Philippines. What I do now is while I do corporate work, I also am into a lot of LGBT plus advocacy and activism. So I've been an active advocate for the past 20 years. It's been great. Lots of challenges, but also lots of development and lots of change. I've ventured into writing. I've done some writing. I have a book.
I
I
have
did
your
that,
book.
and I'm never gonna do that again. But it's okay. But I just wanted to do it once, and be happy with that. So I'm good. But I do have articles on different websites. I'm published in the Philippines as well in anthologies and compilations. I'm also published actually by a Canadian author as well in one of the I believe compilations also for LGBT Filipinos. So it's been a bit of a ride for me, I guess, in terms of activism and advocacy. But now I am one of the co-founders of Side B Philippines, and what we do is we actually advocate for bivisibility. So yes, I am bisexual to answer everyone's question, and we also advocate for workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those are the two main advocacies that we do. Sogie education is basic. One of the basic things that we also do. Lots of companies actually ask us to discuss this, and it has never gotten old. Lots of changes from the first time that we did this. It's been, let's say, about since 2016. So there have been a lot of things that have developed, a lot of things that have changed. Even I have to remember all the terminologies, so it's not really easy. But you got to keep yourself up to date so that
Yes.
that is how you can help more people understand the community, and how important Soji is to all of us, not just in the community, but also outside the LGBT plus community.
That's true. That is why we want to do this topic as a podcast because not everyone, even those in the LGBT community, not everyone knows everything about Soji, right? So, this is our way of helping our friends as well to try and be enlightened about the subject. We are dealing with a lot of acronyms, right? You just mentioned several of them. So, can you enlighten us about and why it is important to understand, like, first and foremost, LGBTQ and then DIE and SOGI. So I know it's a
Oh
handful.
wow. Yeah, we'll get to that. Sure, sure. Okay, so maybe we can start with when we talk about the LGBT plus community. Some of us nowadays, we also say Soji diverse community. It really depends. And those terminologies are acceptable. They're actually okay. The reason that we put the word plus after LGBT, so I don't really go through all the letters. I just say
Yeah.
LGBT plus. Some people say LGBTQIA plus.
QIA plus, yeah.
Yeah.
So what is correct? I mean, a
So
lot of people
all of
ask me to like what it is really. How many letters are we going to put there?
there are a lot of letters in the alphabet soup.
Yeah.
There are a lot of letters, but I would like, I guess, to be very very open about the answer to your question, which is all of them are correct. I don't think there's anything wrong with people saying LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA plus, or LGBT plus. The plus is inclusive. I'm not sure who would disagree with me, because maybe some people might feel left out, but for me, the plus encompasses every other letter in the, in the big beautiful rainbow alphabet that we have. So
Yeah, and
maybe,
let's not make it hard for them to remember, right?
yeah, I know, right? So I'm good, whatever it is. Nowadays I hear a lot of LGBTQIA plus, which is more common. So if you guys want to go with the trend, we can do that. You can do that. But those are all like, and we'll go through like what those letters mean when we go into a Soji discussion, right?
Okay.
Because it's highly dependent on that. Not all the letters reflect the same aspects of Soji. So we will need to understand what they reflect and what they represent, right? DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So nowadays, there's a huge move in corporate, especially where I'm from, in
Yes,
Manila.
also here in North
Yep,
America, it's a huge
th-
thing.
it's a huge thing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. So basically, a lot of companies are now putting a lot of focus into diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness, actually, practices in the workplace. So that's a pretty good thing. Actually, that did not exist 10 years ago. I wouldn't say it existed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't there. But nowadays, I think it's a great thing that we're all doing that. Um, and then, of course, you explained earlier the acronym SOGI. So if you want, we can, go ahead and break it down and see how it works.
Well, yeah, go ahead. It's fine. I mean, let's educate ourselves as much as possible, not just the viewers. I think I myself also need a lot of education about it.
Oh my. So, I mean, I think I would also like to make sure that we have a disclaimer on the show. Um, since all of these terminologies develop through time, in about maybe 2 or 3 years, probably what I'm saying is going to be old. So I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that, we tag this recording, it's 2023, and this is as of my knowledge today.
Okay.
So
No problem.
let's let's get to it. So nowadays, Soji is discussed using the terminology Soji SC. I know it's probably the first time you're hearing that.
Yeah.
Um, so Soji is sexual orientation, gender identity. The E is for gender expression. SC is actually is actually an acronym for sexual characteristics. All right.
Okay.
And there is a reason we kind of need to include that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. All
Okay.
right. So sexual characteristics, or SC, part of SOGI SC, actually points towards the characteristics of a person when they are born, that point towards sexuality of that person, or what we call uh, biological characteristics. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you know how when you're born, the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl, right?
Yeah. So,
All right.
yeah, when I research it, they name it as sex at birth.
Sex assigned at birth, right?
Yeah.
So we can use that term. Sex assigned at birth is highly based on usually on what the doctor or whoever sees you for the first time when you're born, whatever they see in terms of your physical characteristics. So essentially, they look at a baby, and obviously, all babies look the same, except when you look at the genitals of the baby, right? So they
Yeah.
look at the genital part of the baby and say, "Oh, look, it's a boy," or "Oh, it's a girl," right? And those parts that they look at are part of sexual characteristics. Now, there are other characteristics like hormones, for example,
Mhm.
wherein you kind of need to be tested for those, because obviously you can't see hormones
Yeah.
externally, but they are part of sexual characteristics as well. And what does that mean? That actually means that there are some people who may not exhibit um, characteristics of male or femaleness, um, sort of like in the amount of how much they have those characteristics. For example, I'm not sure if we're familiar with the term, and this is very outdated. Please do not use this, hermaphrodite. And this is meant to educate people, right? So
Yes.
the term hermaphrodite was coined a long time ago to express the idea or represent people who express sexual characteristics of both male and female. So nowadays, we do not call them hermaphrodites anymore. They are now called
Intersect.
intersex.
Yes.
But then to be called intersex doesn't necessarily mean that you have visibly characteristics of both male and female. So some intersex people do. I think we've heard of that, right? A lot.
Yes.
That there are people who physically and visually exhibit characteristics of both maleness and femaleness when it comes to sexual organs externally. But there are also intersex people who have these characteristics, but it will be based on the level of hormones that they have: testosterone, estrogen, all that. So they're included in the mix, basically.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to understand that intersex people do exist. They're actually part of the new flag that we have. So if you have
Oh,
seen the
that's
new
great.
flag with the circle and the
Yeah.
yellow background, that flag, part of that flag actually symbolizes the intersex people or represents them. Okay. So basically, we have three for sex assigned at birth, or sex characteristics. We have man, we have woman, and we have intersex. So before, it only used to be binary, right? It was
Yes.
man and woman. But now we have intersex people, right? Or male and female, and then intersex. It's a boy, it's a girl. Oh, it's the baby is intersex.
So it's
Right.
more physical, like what they see.
Mostly what they see, but again, for intersex people, it's not just what they see, but it could be other characteristics that are hidden from the naked eye and need to be looked at deeper by a medical
Okay.
professional. Yeah. So those are sex characteristics. And it's important for us to note those things because when we talk about gender identity, right, we kind of base it off on what the sexual characteristics are or what the sex assigned at birth is. Because in gender identity, it's essentially your internal sense of self as a man or a woman, or neither, both, or in between. So that's a lot to think about, right? So again,
Yes.
it's not binary. There's something that is non-binary, something that is in the middle. But then again, people would always ask me, so if it's a sense of oneself as man, woman, or in between, neither or both, right?
Hmm.
Um, what does that mean if a person um if a person's sex assigned at birth is not aligned to their gender identity?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would
That's
always
that's a
uh,
problem.
yeah, it's some people don't understand that that
Yes.
could happen. So if anybody ever asks you guys the question, but isn't it that sex assigned at birth always aligns to gender identity? It does not. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there it aligns for many people that we know, right? But there are people where it does not align. And for example, we're talking about transgender people, right?
Yes.
Now, the word trans in transgender does not mean transform. It also does not mean transformer or
Yeah.
transcendence, because some people are making assumptions about what it means. That is not what it means. Trans comes from the Latin term which means on the other side. So trans people are assigned a sex at birth by the doctor, but when they grow up and they realize who they are, they realize how what their gender is as they grow up, what they identify with, then they identify with the gender that's not the same as one that they are assigned at birth. Old terminology would be female to male, male to female, transgender. Nowadays, we hardly ever use that. Actually, we just use the terms trans man and trans woman.
Okay.
And even gender neutral people are kind of part of that, but we can go to that in a bit. Did you have a question?
Yes. Honestly, you kind of already went into it, but I just want to like dig deeper in like how or other examples or maybe common scenarios of challenges that individuals who are non-binary, trans, or those gender non-conforming Sogies, the challenges that they face?
That's a great question. I mean, trans or GNC, gender neutral persons, right? GNC people, there are specific challenges to being that way. For example, like me, I'm transgender, and there are things that I need to deal with on a daily basis. First of all, I'm no longer medically transitioning, so that makes it harder for me. I actually used to. So there was a time that I would what we call pass as cisgender
Mhm.
male or female. So cisgender is when your gender identity is aligned to your sex assigned at birth. Again, cis is a Latin word which means on the same side. So it's legit.
So, to be simple for some, yung straight, ganon.
Not really. We'll go to that.
Okay.
We'll go to that. We'll go to that. Puntahan natin yan. But hindi pa yan yon. But that's interesting, and I want you to keep that there, that thought,
Yeah.
because we're gonna
We'll
talk
go
about
back to
that
that.
later. Yeah, we'll get to that, I promise. But there are a lot of challenges. If we're gonna talk about transgender care, and especially in the Philippines, and if you want this to be Philippines focused, that's cool with me.
Yes.
First of all, transgender care is practically non-existent as far as of official government support. We don't have that. But to be fair, there are certain medical practitioners clinics that actually support transgender folks, and not just people who want to physically transition, but even those who need mental health assistance,
Oh, good.
or consultation. There is a community of trans people that has compiled a list of resources that are available to trans people. So that's a good thing. That's a great development. Um, but there are still challenges. For example, I know several transgender folks who live obviously live in as their authentic selves, in the gender that they identify as. But the problem is they can't change their name.
Yeah, that's
So
a big problem.
it's a huge
Actually,
problem. Yeah, I mean, here it's very difficult for us to do a name change. There are
yes.
some people who have been successful to do legal alias, changes and all that. But generally, it takes time. It takes a little bit of money, that kind of thing. And not everybody has access to that kind of support, right? Financial and all
Yes.
that. It's difficult. So one is that. Second is we don't have a gender recognition law in the country.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
problem with that is that even if you change, um, everything, you change everything physically, and let's say you're successful, let's say your name is unisex. It sometimes happens that your name is very
Mhm.
unisex. You can use it, right? And you won't be embarrassed, but then the sex marker on your birth certificate will not be changed.
Oh,
So
yeah. And
yeah,
I actually know someone. I mean, it was a real error on his birth
birth
certificate.
certificate.
Yeah, that it was it the first one was written as female. So he had to go
Uh,
through like court appearances trying to prove that he's male. And
yeah,
then
and the medical
after all,
certificate.
yeah,
Yeah.
and after all that hassle, you know what just happens? This paper, there will just be a note on the side that
Ooh,
that sex is male. So
wow.
all that trouble, it will just be a note there.
Oh my goodness, that's horrible. But you
Yeah.
know what? And maybe we can take a look back at, the topic we were talking about earlier on intersex people.
Yes.
However, there is a way that intersex people in the country can sort of like make changes to their birth certificate. Some of them have been successful. There are cases. There was a case here wherein I believe that the person was tagged as female, maybe based on external factors that they observed when the person was born, but then the gender identity of that person is male. Apparently, he was able to prove in court that he's intersex, so the court made him choose. When they discovered that, okay, so apparently you have characteristics of both male and femaleness, so you can go ahead and choose. So he was able to fix that. But
But
then,
you still have to
yeah,
go through a lot of
a lot of
trouble
work, a lot of legal stuff,
and
all that.
money.
and money, yeah. But he was able to do it. However, again, he had a case there because he is intersex, and he was able to prove that he was intersex. So apparently, intersex people have a larger chance of being able to identify as the gender, to identify legally identify as the gender that they know they are.
But
That's kind of there.
that's not the case for everyone, right?
Oh no, no. And being transgender is not grounds for name change or gender marker reassignment on your birth certificate. It's definitely not like that. Even if you've done everything, if
Oh
even
wow.
if you've medically transitioned, even if you have socially transitioned, it doesn't matter. Your gender marker will stay the same. Your name will probably stay the same, unless you do something about it, which will take a long and costly process, basically. Um,
Yeah, and I think
yeah,
there are more options abroad than in the
there are.
Philippines. Yeah.
Oh, the Philippines. Well, we're gonna get there someday, hopefully. We've
Yeah,
done a lot of things.
but at least there's progress, right?
Well, right now my view is really like as long as there is progress, I do not need perfection today. That's fine.
Yes. That's
So
true.
progress is always good. But then somehow it's a little slow. But that's okay. We'll get there. I mean, there's other things that have really developed in the country. But then we still have the same challenges. There's a lot of even the basic access to facilities is already an issue with trans people.
Yeah.
I mean, using the right bathroom and all, which is a huge debate.
I know. I have heard a lot of stories like, back in the day, of course, I have a lot of
Hmm. Hmm.
butch friends and they would go to the bathroom of the female. And a lot of old lady would like
They would send them out.
swat them with an
Get
umbrella.
out.
Get out! You're not supposed
And
to be here.
yeah, and you know what, that actually brings us to really the discussion as part of Soji intersexual orientation, because I guess there's a lot of miseducation that happens around that, and that's why people don't understand, and they take one look at you and they think you don't belong in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, or in the washroom that you're using. So I think there's a lot of sad miseducation around it. But then again, times were different before and it's different now. So people are a lot more tolerant nowadays. I wouldn't say accepting. Everybody keeps insisting that the Philippines is accepting of LGBT people. Well, we're probably tolerant at best. Just
Yeah.
saying, as a country, we're probably tolerant at best. But it is a blessing that in Southeast Asia, the Philippines is still the most tolerant. So I think that's still a blessing for all of us. And it's still good. We just really need to work a little bit harder, to turn that into acceptance and belongingness, which I think is very important for the community to feel, within a larger community of people, right? And I mean, I think that we were kind of talking about that in terms of how trans people are accepted, what are the challenges. There are also other challenges when it comes to non-binary people who, could fall under the trans umbrella as well, because for non-binary people, one of the largest challenges I see is the use of the pronouns for them, because it's
Yes.
not he or she, it's usually they or z or ella or some other
Yes.
neo pronoun. That's what they were referred to when people were talking to me. They say, oh, it's a neo pronoun. Okay, so I'm not sure what that means, but it's definitely a non-binary pronoun that they use. And sometimes people don't understand that you can actually use those pronouns for those people. It's one thing to adjust, your view of pronoun usage when you meet a trans man or a trans woman, sure, but then it's still binary. It's still he, it's still she. But can
Yes.
you imagine calling a person they, right? So sometimes people get
It
confused.
confuses your English syntax of I
I
only see
know, right?
one person. Why are
But
you saying
well, but you see,
they?
they can actually be used as a neutral pronoun. I've seen it used when people don't know the gender of the person they're speaking with, or they don't know the gender of the person they're gonna meet or interact with. They always say they. I
I
mean, for
actually love it that people are less assuming nowadays. They would always ask you what are your
yeah,
pronouns, which is great. I mean, for some they don't understand why we have to like why do
yeah,
I have to answer that? Don't I look girl to you? Right? But you can't assume, right? You can't
yeah,
assume,
it's
which
right.
is great. I mean, I had that problem before back in the Philippines. I was talking to someone who is who's gay, but in a dress, and I still referred as him. I was corrected, like, you know, either you ask or you refer to how they present themselves, which is, I think, which is just proper.
I think, some people ask me about that sometimes. How do you ask for pronouns? How will it sound not impolite? And normally what I'd say is, well, the best way to do it is to make an example of yourself when you introduce yourself, right? So for example, with me, when I introduce myself, I say, "Hey, so I'm Fire and my pronouns are he and him. How about you? What would you like me to call you?" And then the person will kind of follow and say, "Oh yeah, I'm Mike and
Yeah.
my pronouns are he and him." So you would kind of like, if you show a person that you're comfortable doing it that way, they'll probably react the same way. Many people who are not part of the LGBT plus community find it awkward, I guess. Many people I know,
Yeah.
they find it awkward, but there is an importance to understanding pronoun use and why it's important, and why it's being like it's becoming a common practice nowadays, especially. And I'm seeing this on LinkedIn and all those,
Yes.
business type social media
I actually love that LinkedIn did
platforms.
that because they are the
Yeah.
social media for professionals.
I love it actually. I think that it was one of the best things that they did, so that people who look at your profile notice the pronoun right
Yes.
away, and they use the right one when they write you a message. So
Yes,
I think
that's true.
it's pretty awesome that they do that. I love it. But yeah, I mean, and I mean, I think Jazz, earlier on we were talking about when you referred to cisgender people as straight, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
why don't we go to that? Okay,
Yes,
we'll go to
please.
go to that. It's okay, and I don't want to confuse you. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're
Yeah,
getting this right,
I
right?
know. There are a lot of people more confused than I am, but I am part of the confused people.
It's fine. It's fine. One thing that we should remember is that when we talked about um gender identity, we are talking about the sense of a person in terms of uh how they see themselves, the sense of oneself as either a man, a woman, neither, both, or in between, right? That is what we're looking at. So we're looking at pronoun use, we're looking at live name usage as well, anything that will represent that gender identity for that person. But what we need to remember is that gender identity is different from sexual orientation.
Okay.
When straight is a
Yeah.
sexual orientation, right? It is.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
heterosexual, right?
Yes.
And when we look at sexual orientation, we can break it down into three, just to keep the conversation a little simpler, right? So we have the heterosexual part, all right, which you commonly refer to as straight,
Straight.
right?
Yes.
And then we have the homosexual part, people who are either gay
The
if
gay
they're
and
men,
lesbians.
and
Yeah.
lesbians, right? If you're women, then you're lesbians, right?
Yeah.
And then you have bisexual, right? Which
Hmm.
we will explain in a little bit. So I don't want to confuse people. We'll go one by one, okay?
Yeah.
So a heterosexual person obviously is a person who is attracted to somebody of the opposite gender. Okay, we cool?
Yes.
All right.
That
Okay.
is that is what we all know
As straight.
from yes, as straight and like Taylor's oldest time.
I know everybody thinks that everybody assumes everyone is straight. Basically, that's the
Till they're
danger,
not.
sometimes. Oh no. But it's, I guess, yeah, straight is a sexual orientation, and I think it's one of the things that we confuse with gender identity most of the time, right? So
Yes.
for example, and I don't mean to confuse you, but I will try my very best to illustrate the situation, okay? So for example, we have our friend, let's say we'll name him Paul, okay? So Paul is attracted to women, right? And
Mm-hmm.
only women, and only women. So Paul is obviously straight.
Yes.
We're cool?
A
We're cool.
straight
All
guy.
right. He's a straight guy. He's a straight guy. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's take, for example, a girl, and we'll name her Sarah, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Okay. Sarah is a trans woman. So Sarah was assigned male at birth, but is actually female when it comes to gender identity. So she is
Okay.
a trans, her pronouns are she and her, and she is a trans woman. It's easy, right? She's a
Yes.
woman. Now, Sarah is attracted to guys like Paul.
Mhm.
So, what does that make Sarah? she's a woman and she's attracted only to men.
Well, that kind of sounds like a heterosexual relationship to me,
There
right?
you
So,
go. So Sarah is a straight trans woman. There you go.
yeah.
Awesome.
I'm sure we confuse so many people right now.
Okay.
But yeah, that
So
that is the truth of the world today. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's been happening before. It's just that now that we openly talk about it, right? I mean,
yeah,
before it just happens and people don't talk about it.
right.
Right.
I think the conversation on gender needs to happen. We need to understand the
Yes.
community. Yeah. So there, I mean, and I used to be so grossly misinformed about trans people. I mean, I'm transgender myself, but I was grossly misinformed. So so I think that's where we can show the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation.
Okay,
Now,
that's great. Yeah.
okay, now let's not forget Sarah and Paul. Okay, we need
Yeah.
them. All right, we need them in this conversation. We have established who they are. All
Yeah.
right, now let's go to homosexual. So this one is easy also. This is basically attraction to a person of the same gender. So basically, if you're Paul, for example, and let's say Paul is not attracted to women. Paul is attracted to people like Brian, who is also a man.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes Paul homosexual. It makes him gay,
Mhm.
right? Okay. It's easy, right? It
Yeah.
makes him gay. All right. Now, let's go to Brian, the other guy. Now,
Okay.
what if Brian is also attracted to Paul? That makes
Okay.
Brian gay as well. He's not attracted
Yes.
to women, he's attracted to men like Paul. But Brian is a transgender man.
Okay.
So, Brian, who was assigned female at birth, her the name was probably Bridget or something like that. I don't know. And then Bridget changed his name to Brian because
Yeah.
he's Brian. That's his gender identity is transgender man. And now he's a trans man, but he is attracted to other men. So what does that
Okay.
make Brian?
A gay guy.
That's right. So Brian
Right?
is a gay transgender man. Are we
Yeah.
doing okay here? Am I confusing
Yeah.
you?
I hope we did not make people cross-eyed right now trying to imagine them. But
So
yeah, I mean,
okay.
we've seen it happen.
So that's the relationship, right, between sexual orientation and gender identity. They are not the same, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about LGBT, the lesbian, gay, bisexual part, these are sexual orientations. The T is a gender identity. They're not of the same, really, right?
Yeah.
There. So we did an example on heterosexual, homosexual. Let's go to bisexual, okay? It's one of my
Mhm.
favorites because people make a lot of assumptions about my community. Um,
I know. Same
so
here. I'm also
so if we go into how that looks like for me personally, and I just don't want to confuse people, but I'll do it anyways. No, I'm kidding. So my sex assigned at birth, which is kind of funny. When the doctor saw me, and this is weird, he did not look at what I had down there. He looked at my head, and it was bald. So he actually thought I was a boy because I came out head first.
Oh,
I
okay.
came out head first, and I was facing the ceiling. I did not come out sideways. I came out
Yeah.
facing the ceiling. So the first thing the doctor saw was my very bald head, and he told my dad, "It's a boy." And then my dad, well, he was right, but then he
Yeah,
he corrected it.
he's onto something.
He was right. He said, "Oh my God, this person's gonna grow up to be a boy," but but no, that's not what happened, obviously, because when he saw the rest of me, he said, "Oh, it's a girl." So anyway, my sex assigned at birth on my birth certificate is female. I identify as a man. I am a trans man, but my attraction or my sexual orientation is attraction to the same and a different gender. That doesn't mean I'm attracted to more than one gender at the same time. It's not really like that, or in the same degree, or in the same way. It is not like that. But I identify as a trans man, and my sexual orientation is bisexual. So bisexual people, there's a lot of misconceptions about us, a lot. And I think that that's probably for another podcast. But
Yeah.
one thing we can really say is that it is defined as an attraction towards two different genders, or towards different genders, because there's like other folks, right? Like pansexual people who are kind of under the bi umbrella at this point.
Yeah.
Some of them don't want to be under the umbrella, by the way, but that's okay. I mean, it's and yeah, and I think it's important for us to understand that bisexuality is not necessarily a phase. I mean, it could be for some people. I understand
Yeah.
that. That's okay. But it's not a phase for other people, especially myself. I've always been bisexual ever since.
Yeah, the
So
most
there, I
common
mean,
things that I hated when people discovers that I am bi is one they would tell me is that, "Oh, so you're confused."
oh
No.
gosh.
It's like
That
you
is
just can't make up your mind. No, I know.
That is horrible. Oh my. So bisexuality is part of sexual orientations. Yeah, I even have the flag right there.
Oh, nice.
Right. But it's a sexual orientation. I think it's important that people understand what that means as well. So there are trans people who are straight, there are transgender people who are bisexual, and there are trans people who are homosexual. Basically, because transgender, among the four most popular letters, LGBT, transgender is the only one that points towards gender identity. Everything else is a
Yeah.
sexual orientation. So that's pretty much your gender identity portion and your sexual orientation portion of today. But we're not skipping out on gender expression. That this one is easier, much easier. I mean, gender expression essentially just talks about how you outwardly manifest your gender, um, or how you outwardly present yourself, basically.
Yes.
Clothes, live name, way of mannerism, movement, walking, basically what people see outside, right? But you know what's also kind of important when it comes to when it comes to gender expression, is that it's quite highly based on environmental and societal norms. So what I'm trying to say is that what is masculine? So basically, it's masculine, feminine, and androgynous, right?
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is that what's masculine in one place could be feminine in another, depending on where you are in the world, on where you grew up, how you were raised, etc. So all these things that influence your gender expression are essentially influenced by how you were oriented when you were young, on what is masculine and what is feminine, or what is in between or androgynous. Right. So for gender expression, we just have three. We have masculine, feminine, and androgyny. Androgynous, again, people, we want to give them the gray area, which is
Yeah.
basically not really much of a gray area. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's pretty clear. But androgynous people are also are valid. It's just basically because they don't want to be solely identified as masculine or feminine. They just want to be, chill, right in the center
Yes.
or whatever.
Back
Yeah.
in
So
the
we have
day, they
those.
say, I don't want to be labeled. Right?
Normally that would go for all, yeah, for androgynous people,
Yes.
androgynous presenting people. That would also go for gender neutral people, or
Mm.
people who identify both as male and female. Sometimes they're just gonna say, "Well, I don't want to be labeled." And the most popular terminology for people who don't want to be labeled is actually queer. Many people use that term as a general, thing, and they would just say, "Well, I'm not really sure. I don't want to be labeled as a lesbian or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
queer." The point is
Okay.
they're not straight. They're
Yeah.
just not straight. They're queer. Right. And queer could be a gender identity. It could be, people use it as a gender expression. Sometimes people use it as even as a sexual orientation. It's a very general term.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people use it in very different ways.
Yes, and now we learned several ways on how to use it as well. So just going back, I mean, the Philippine culture is very conservative. So what advice can you give someone who discovers a friend or a family member is in the LGBTQ? I mean, we have a lot of coming out stories and
Mhm.
struggles, right? So I mean, if any of our viewers right there would be on the other side, like a family member, like maybe if they have a hint, like, maybe my sister is lesbian, or I don't know. Right? So so maybe for that family member, because I mean, it's also a struggle for them. I mean, not just the person who is part of the LGBTQ community, but also, I mean, their family. Like they may have a problem on how to address it. Is it something that needs to be talked about?
All of these things like coming out, expressing yourself, these are all personal choices, right? One of the things that I think that we need to make sure people don't do is to force somebody to come out. That's the only thing that's important. We don't force people to come out, even if we suspect them of something, or we suspect that they're gay or whatever. We don't say, "Aha, you're gay. I knew it." You gotta wait for the person to come out and be open to talk about it to you. Um, and I think generally this is all about relationship. What kind of relationship do you have with this person? How open is your relationship with your brother, your sister, your cousin, or even your parents, in case any of them decides to come out as something else, right? So it's all about relationship. And if you have been able to build a relationship wherein there's a lot of openness, there's a lot of acceptance, and you express views that are not, threatening to that person, right? You're not homophobic or anything like that, or biphobic or whatever, or transphobic, then that person will more likely tell you on their own about themselves. Some people don't find it necessary to come out. They don't need they don't need, to come out because they feel like, oh, it's not really important, so I don't need to do it. And that's fine. I mean, if they don't want to do it, it's okay, right? That's their
That's true.
choice as well. But if you're on the other side, as you would call it, of the process, then
Yeah.
once a person comes out to you, whatever you do after that depends on the dynamic that that person wants to move forward with. So if they come out to you because they want you to know, because all their friends already know and you're the only one who doesn't know, then that's essentially just making sure that you're included right in that
Yeah.
circle. Okay. But if they come out to you because they have no one else to come out with, then that means that you're the very first person they trust, right?
Mhm.
And you do not need to out them to other people. So how you move forward after getting information that somebody is who they are, um, that it depends on the kind of relationship that you have with this person. It depends on the objective of that person. And when people come out, you can ask them, I mean, who knows? Does anybody else know? And then they'll tell you're the only one who doesn't know. And
That's
I'm telling
true.
you because I didn't want to hurt your feelings or something like that. Ikaw pa yung na-hurt, no? But anyway, so I'm
Baka
just
may
saying
fear
that
of missing out ka.
yun nga eh. So what I'm only saying is that, however you move forward with it depends on how that person wants to move forward with you. But every coming out experience, and if you're part of that experience, you also come out with that person. You support that person. So if that person is out and about, um, and not well it not everybody comes out to everyone, but sometimes it's obvious, you know what I mean. So and if that person needs your moral support, like when talking to other people about the whole thing, then you give that moral support, right? I mean, for example, like let's talk about my family. For example, some of their friends actually like my nieces and my nephews. So in all fairness, they're so well adjusted. They all call me Tito, which is really cool,
Oh, wow.
which means uncle, by the way. So they all call me that. And sometimes when their friends actually ask them, why do you call them Tito? And then they would say, because he's my Tito. So you have that support wherein for them it's really not a big deal. They just adjust right away
But
and they
it's
don't
really
feel
a
the
good
need to
feeling,
explain it.
right?
Yeah, it is. It's a great feeling that you get their support. And it's not just when they talk to you, it's when they talk to other
To
people
other
as
people.
well, which is pretty cool, right? So this is the kind of support that we'll need, as a community wherein we know we are accepted and respected. So I think it's important that when you come out, you involve those people and make sure that they understand what's going on. Some of them don't, like what you said
Yeah.
earlier. People sometimes they don't know what's going on, so they just need to understand. And I think that, I wouldn't want to label people as the older generation, but there have been experiences
Yes.
with folks who are a little bit older wherein they they view the LGBT plus community as they view sexuality as being all about sex, which it is not.
Yeah.
Sexuality encompasses so many things. It's Sogie. That's what it is.
Yes.
It encompasses your identity. It encompasses your orientation, your gender expression. That's what it is. But sometimes they misinterpret it and feel that, oh, this is all about sex and sodomy and stuff like that.
Wow.
I mean, it's like saying we're incapable of having a loving relationship, right? It's like saying that,
Yeah.
like, oh, well, you guys are all about sex, so you're incapable of having a real relationship, which is kind of weird. We aren't incapable. We know this. We know this, that we are not incapable of those things. So I think that removing that stigma from the community is important, and that's why we do Soji education. That's why we make sure people understand that sexuality is not just about what you do in the bedroom, but it is about your life. It is about your relationship. It is about, your committed relationships, or even your non-committed relationships for that matter, right? And it is about your family as well, and how they support you.
Yeah, and I think it is also a lot about you yourself, right? It starts there. I mean, even before having a relationship with someone, I guess right now there's a lot of interest because a lot of people are in dating apps and they have to answer like, "What is this?
Oh
Why
yeah.
are why are they asking if I'm this or that? So what does this mean?" It's high time to have some education, not and this is not just an issue that concerns the LGBT community. It is for everyone. When I invited you for this, that is exactly what I have in mind. I mean, we can have other sessions for other topics because I'm sure there are a lot of other things that we can talk about, but let's get this out first because this is I think the very basic that people need to understand, and even I for myself I need a lot of enlightenment about this. If someone is struggling with gender identity and sexual orientation, what advice can you give them? And like in the Philippines, I think you mentioned a while ago that there are already like support group or
Mhm.
counseling. Like, where can they go?
So the internet and Facebook is amazing. I don't mean to plug them, but there are a lot of groups on Facebook that actually help.
Yes.
So just a simple search about LGBT counseling, or transgender transitioning. A simple search will take you to many groups that are supportive, and that can provide resources for you to safely out yourself, or to safely transition medically if you need to do that. I think it's important for people to know that there is a lot of support out there. It's just not centralized at the moment. Frankly, we don't have that centralized support, but there are groups, many groups, by the way, that provide a lot of help. And I think that it's also pretty much promoting safe transitions, also, especially for trans people. There are a number of trans people who don't safely transition. Like, they just take pills or they just inject hormones without thinking about it, and that is not advisable. There are doctors who can help. You need to have a consultation. You need to know if you're healthy enough for these things, right? Um, Before you do anything. So these groups exist to help you with that. And there are groups also that exist to help you transition socially. Let's say you're not ready for medical transition, but you want to transition socially. So there are groups that help with that too. Interestingly enough, there are groups that exist also to lobby. Who can lobby for you. There have been groups that have been successful in having trans students wear the clothes of their gender identity for graduation rights. And these are students, right? Yeah, we have been successful in assisting, not everyone. It's kind of hard to assist everyone, but we have been successful in assisting uh, several students who identify as transgender, march, as in go on stage,
Oh
um,
wow,
and receive their diploma in the clothes that they would like to wear that represents their gender identity. And
that
this
is
is
big.
not, I was going to say, yeah, this was not something that you could do before, but now it's big, and we have been able to do that. So there are support groups, lobbying groups, even for people like me who don't medically transition, because when you're trans, you don't have to medically transition. It's not a requirement.
I actually
Because
wanted to
remember,
ask that
it's not a
about
requirement.
being trans. Like to be someone who is trans, do you have to medically transition, or is it
Not
a choice?
necessarily. It is a choice. Remember, being trans is all about how you see yourself. It's all about your view of yourself as man or woman, or neither in between, or both. Um, so medically transitioning is not really a requirement for that. And let's maybe put some terminologies in there, right? So there are a couple of ways that people do it. Some people do what we call GAHT or GAT, gender affirming hormone therapy.
They drink
Yeah,
medicine.
you
Okay.
so for trans women it's usually pills. It's orally
Okay.
taken. For trans men it's usually injectable testosterone. That's how it works. In Western countries, they have a testosterone patch, like a gel patch, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't have that here, so it's not something we do here. But yeah, so you essentially change the hormone, mix, to put it simply, mix of your body. You either put more estrogen to be more feminine, and you essentially put more testosterone to be more masculine, something like that. It does change your body. There's a lot of changes that happen. But again, maybe that's for another podcast because
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff we can talk about there.
but you don't have to
Uh,
go through all that to
you
become
don't.
a trans person.
Yeah, you seriously don't. So you don't have to go through GAT or gender affirming hormone therapy, or you also don't need to go through what we call gender affirming surgery, right? Um, or gender reaffirming surgery for that matter, GRS. Um, oh, and we don't call it sex change, so that's old. That's like so 80s. we, we we no longer say sex change. All right, we call it gender reaffirming surgery. All right, because you are reaffirming the gender of the person who is undergoing the procedure. So yeah,
Okay.
just want to make sure that's out there as well.
Yeah, I know. But like for me, I also have some old school thoughts that back in the day it's butch and femme. So right now is the butch the trans, like in
Not
terms of
really.
lesbian. So you can be butch but not trans.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of butch lesbians I know, and they
Me
identify as
too.
women. Yeah, I'm sure you do, and they identify as women. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with butch women who identify as women, and who call themselves lesbians or bisexual for that matter. It's fine because remember, being butch is more of a gender expression, really, right? It's just that you're a little bit more masculine than everybody else, and that
Yeah.
doesn't, yeah, masculinity or femininity doesn't necessarily point towards your gender identity right away. It's not really like that.
You talked about people who are trying to transition and being safe. I actually remember when my I was accompanying my father in his dialysis,
Hmm.
and I actually talked to someone who is transgender. She actually got the chronic kidney disease because she tried to do it on her own. So yes.
Yeah.
So please, everyone out there, do it safely if you want to. There are a lot of groups that can help you, and the internet is out there. A lot of resources. Please be safe. Another thing that I wanted to ask you is, what is the best way to handle like untoward reaction or treatment? Like, let's do it in layers, like one from
Mhm.
strangers and others from surroundings, like maybe people around you in the office or school. And then the third one is the closest to us, which is
Mhm.
mostly our family or friends. So, like, what would be the best way?
That is a hard question because people handle things differently, right? Depending on the community that you're in and your kind of family. It's different. I mean, seriously, if you ask me what I would do, I would just walk away and not bother because there are just some people that are not worth my time. I hate to say that, but sometimes it's like that. And we just really need to push forward with the education that we're putting out there. We just need to push forward with those things, and hopefully, they will reach the people that it needs to reach at this point. Um, and also maybe because I just really don't want to cause a commotion or issues. But but there's a difference. If people become verbally or physically abusive, that's different. Then
That's
you
the
call
line.
that, yeah, that's the line. Yeah, they crossed the line, so you're gonna cross it back. And
Yeah.
I
And
would probably say something. Especially, it's different too. I mean, if we're talking about just random stranger comments, normally, of course, these are the people who have issues and who don't understand what's going on, who don't understand the community. We already know that part. But then if it's
yes.
just one or two things, then you're right. Me personally, I would let it slide and go and leave and not bother. But if it is something that impacts, my ability to move around, my ability to do what I need to do for the day. For example, there was a case here where there was a trans woman. And in the Philippines we have the women's, what do you call that, women's train car in the LRT or the MRT.
Yeah, the first one.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So there's the first car is usually all for women, right? Just so that you can avoid all the, sardining and
Yeah.
and the other cars with all the boys. So what I there was a story, an incident wherein a trans woman was not allowed to use the women's car. And she was clearly a trans woman, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
trans woman. She was a trans woman. And her friends were really giving the staff a very hard time over it, because they were telling, no, no, she's a girl, she's a girl, she has to ride with us, whatever. And then I think, I'm not sure if it's security or whatever, but they were saying, no, no, she can't, well, he actually, they would refer to her as, he can't ride there because he's a boy, he's a man, whatever. So in those instances, I would probably raise a ruckus
Yeah.
for my friends the same way that they did. I would probably start defending this person, because that is not fair. And that impedes, the movement of that person. That affects the commute, it affects the person's time. It just really interferes with your day. So
Yeah.
anything that interferes with your day, I'd probably say something. But if it doesn't, then that's fine. And of course, if I feel threatened, I would say something, because that's different, right? If
Yes.
it's threatening, then I would probably say something or do something. Like, I would seek, legal help, or I would probably, go into, like, alert law enforcement or whatever. It
Yeah.
really depends on the
Yeah.
situation. But yeah, I mean, you just want to do what's best for yourself and what will not get you into so much trouble. But at the end of the day, never stop advocating for yourself. If it concerns close friends and family, and they have, all these slurs, I mean, seriously, I am not afraid to unfriend people in real life, even if they are family members. I'm seriously not afraid to do that. I can do that. I was ready to lose my entire family, by the way. I was prepared for that. And this is in the early 2000s. I was
Yeah.
prepared to freaking lose my family over this whole thing. But you know what? I didn't lose them at all. Not a single family member. So I'm happy about that. At least the ones who I interact with, not a single one. So
Okay.
just be prepared, right? You know what's gonna
Yeah.
happen. Yeah, some people, they just pack up and leave, to be honest. And they have told me that it has been great for their mental health. That, I just packed up and left my entire homophobic family because they're not good for me. No matter how much I explain, they still judge me, so I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah. Choose
And
your sanity.
best decision ever, they said. But you see, it may not work for everyone. Again,
Yeah.
assess your situation and do what is best for you, and make sure that you will always have support, no, in whatever form it is. As long as it's not bad influence support, then you're good,
Yeah.
right? Like, you don't get yourself into trouble, you don't get yourself into drugs or excessive anything for that matter, you don't, right? So, I mean, just do what's best for you.
It's great. So before we end the episode, do you have a message or advice for our listeners?
Gosh, I give horrible advice. You're asking me for advice. No, no, but seriously, and I do a lot of work in the corporate world. One of the things that I say is that if you can bring your most authentic self to your workplace and into your families, within your friends, if you can be your most authentic self, you will be happier that way. If you are allowed to live that authentic self, you will be much more, I guess you'll be much more happier, and you will not have to hide anything or not be afraid to be judged by people. So I think it is great if each and every one of us can work towards living as who we are.
That's great. Thank you so much for a very insightful and educational discussion, Fire. I hope that we were able to shed some light on these topics. Again, ignorance and resistance does not mean it doesn't exist. We are all here. It concerns everyone. And thank you to our listeners and Fire. I hope to see you again soon.
See you again soon, and thank you to everybody. Bye bye.
Bye. This is Jazmin signing off. Open Yon Opinion would like to hear from our dear listeners. Send us your questions, suggestions, or what you think about this episode. Email us at openyonopinion@gmail.com. Follow, like, and subscribe on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Our podcasts are published on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.